I call to order this meeting of the Santa Barbara Unified School District's Board of Education for Tuesday, January 23rd. And we will now begin rising and to say the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Matsuoka.
Okay, please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Buenas noches. Creo que para el público que quiere escuchar la interpretación ya tienen los aparatos disponibles, pero si no los tienen, ahí los tenemos por las puertas dobles. Gracias.
Thank you, and we do have headsets available for the hearing impaired on the side tables, if anyone in the audience would like a headset. We'll now go to the announcement of closed session action. Basically, we have cases B3 and B4, student discipline and student readmission, that will take place on our action agenda. So moving forward to the superintendent's report.
It was 2 weeks ago when the mudslide had hit, and I think we all knew something big had happened. But we really didn't have much detail, and what unfolded in the next 24, 48 hours was unimaginable. We've all been processing and making sense. I think we all know somebody who was affected. That's what Santa Barbara is. It's a very tight-knit community. We have lost a student at Cleveland. And I stopped by today and just checked in with the staff, and they're good. Kids are learning, kids are smiling, kids are laughing, but it's been a lot of tragedy for that faculty. And we are still waiting for news about our Santa Barbara High School students. So I think it's appropriate to have a moment of silence again in respect for our community. Thank you for that. I just want to add a comment. I called it the bus bridge. I just think that was a really appropriate title for what the county created. That was an amazing collaboration of people, resources, agencies. How that came together over the weekend, Ms. Jate and I we were in the EOC for, that whole weekend building the plan. It worked. I just want to thank our employees who endured like 14-hour days. I mean, there are a couple of them in this room who got on the bus and they came to work. And the response of our staff was incredible. I mean, we got like over 200 people to work because of that bridge, and I heard not a single complaint. Everybody was grateful for the chance to come to work and to support our district and our students. And I think I'm gonna love the value statement that our community said about education and teachers and our workforce. Like, you are as important as all these other groups. So here to our community that values education, and thank you to our employees who endured some really demanding days. So we're back to normal. Normal is a new experience after the last couple months. But I would say Montecito's not going to be normal for a while. I did stop by City College and just saw their operations, and they're doing well. We'll see how long it takes them to get back in their school. So I think the recovery is going to take time. I think we're back to normal, so to speak, but I think it's going to take probably months and years for Montecito to recover. So I think we'll be part of that as a school district, and I just appreciate everybody's participation in this. It's an unprecedented time. None of us have ever been through something like this. So thank you to our team. The cabinet team has held up well. We're a little tired. But I appreciate the teamwork and the calm leadership that they have provided. So that's my remarks.
All right, thank you, Mr. Matsuoka. I would just like to say, as we move into board comments, that I appreciate your leadership during this time, and we were kept abreast of the situation as it progressed, and very timely as to the challenges that our families were facing and our community, and it was devastating. It was devastating. And it is going to take time. But what was good to see is the collaboration and the teamwork of our cabinet, of our staff, the constant reports of everybody just pitching in and pulling together, which was a really great thing to see and hear about and to experience. So thank you, and thank you, cabinet, as well. And do we have any other board comments? Kate?
I'll just tag in on that and just give a shout out to SBTA as well, because, and CSEA, I mean, those were really long days, and it was well outside of any contract, and they were so supportive, and it made such a difference. It's been such a disruption for our students, for the kids in particular, just to have a sense of normalcy and having your classified staff and your teaching staff that you're just used to seeing and being there for you, I think was great. And so I'll tag on that appreciation.
Ms. Sims-Moton?
Yes, and I just echo the comments of my board members. And I just want to say, working at the county level, both in the EOC and now in the recovery assistance, you really see how this community has come together, and not only for this moment, but you can certainly know that it's going to be from years to come, and it'll just be a part of who we are whenever we're facing anything. I think, people are actually seeing each other. We're seeing each other in a different way, and that there's not divisions of where you lived or what a tragedy, that we're actually seeing each other, and that is going to be a lasting relationship that no time or any events in the future will change. So I can just see it from the point of sometimes answering calls, how important it was to have that human contact, and sometimes it's just important just to look someone in the eyes and just give them a smile. That sometimes can make the day and make the difference, and so we must continue to do that as well. Even in midst of the tragedies that we face, but on an everyday level, that to being that we are human every day, and just a smile sometimes and a look makes a huge difference.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Paredes-Ulloa?
And of course, just echoing everyone else's sentiments, but also it was really nice for me as a CC employee and also as a school board member to be able to welcome the Montecito Union students and parents to our campus. Again, I'm lucky. my office is right across the way from them, and so being able to see those students every day, really enjoying their school days, being able to get back to some form of normalcy, and their parents as well. You can tell it really is a big relief. Yes, traffic is congested on SPCC as parents pick up and drop off, but I think it's a small price to pay, and just such a great testament to the ability for our community to come together and work together. Even if we are different school districts, different entities, whatever, doesn't matter. Again, being able to have SBCC, a higher ed institution, be able to bring on these K through 6 students and really welcome them with open arms and really provide as much as we can is huge. And of course, having McKinley across the street take a lot of their students as well is just huge, and really warms my heart, and just really thankful to SBUSD, SBCC, and MUS working together so well, and really providing again just some normalcy for these students and for these parents.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, so we will now move on to item D, acceptance of donations for January 23rd, 2018. Do we have a motion?
Yes, I move to accept with gratitude the donations.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And it passes unanimously. We'll now move on to item E, the consent agenda. Are there any items that fellow board members would like to pull? Ms. Sims-Moton?
Yes, item 7.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. So do I have a motion to approve the remaining consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And that passes unanimously. We will now move on to item F, or action agenda. F1, Board Action on Student Discipline, Education Code 48918, case number 201718-14.
In the case of 2017-1718-14, stipulated agreement, I recommend full suspension for one school year, which ends June 2018.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And it passes unanimously. We'll now move on to item F2, Board Action on Petition for Readmission of an Expelled Student, Education Code 48918, case number 201617-47.
In the case of 201617-47, move approval of re-entry from full expulsion for one school year ended January 2018.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And it passes unanimously. Item F3, Board Action on Petition for Readmission of an Expelled Student, Education Code 48918, case number 201617-54.
In case of 21617-54, move approval of re-entry from suspended expulsion for one school year ended January 2018.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. And it passes unanimously. Move on to item F4, Board Action on Petition for Readmission of an Expelled Student, Education Code 48918, case number 201718-01.
In case of 0171801, move approval of re-entry from suspended expulsion for one school year in June 2018.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. And it passes unanimously. We'll now move on to item F5, Approval of Resolution 2017-18-26, resolution in support of accelerating the distribution of Proposition 51 school facilities bonds. Mr. Hedyunk.
Thank you, Mr. Matsuoka and board members. The current state budget calls for a slowdown in the sale of bonds that would provide districts with state matching funds over what was anticipated when Proposition 51 first passed. The Coalition for Adequate School Housing, CASH, which is an organization that was formed after the passage of the Jarvis-Gann Act in I believe it was 78, the big tax rollback. This coalition was formed to support schools who were facing a budget crisis, both for the general fund and for construction, and they're still in existence today and are a major group in support of school facilities and architects and engineers and construction. They advocate for school districts throughout California, and they have contacted all districts in California asking boards to please pass a resolution which can be sent to them and our local representatives, urging them to find a way to accelerate the sale and distribution of Proposition 51 bonds for matching funds. I've also attached, since we have some board members that may not have seen this chart before, a summary of the matching funds that we received over the last number of years, which shows that we've been able to access state matching funds based on eligibility for millions and millions of dollars. And we have projects that are in line, waiting for funding, and we're hoping to accelerate the distribution of those funds. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Right, are there any board comments or questions? Ms. Parker?
Well, I'll certainly be in support of this because absolutely I feel that that we should be moving forward with these as quickly as we possibly can. I will note that there's a typo in the 6th whereas. Whereas bind should be bond, state bond funds under current law. So I just hope that we can correct that before that gets sent. Will this get sent to the state? Is this organization collecting it?
It will be sent to our 2 state representatives and to CASH. I apologize for the typo. The outline they sent us was in PDF form, and so I had to retype and type the whole resolution.
That's totally understandable. Knowing that we can go ahead and get a motion on the floor and then talk about it further, I'll go ahead and make the motion to pass, to approve resolution number 2017-2018-26.
Second.
So all those in favor? Or do we going to
Is there anybody else that
Does
wants to?
anyone want to discuss it further?
Any big questions?
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, passes unanimously.
Thank you.
So we'll now move on to item F6, approval of mental health, request for proposals. Ms. Wagonet.
The board, at our last meeting, I brought to you a recommendation, narrative and a recommendation that the governing board approve the release of 2 mental health RFPs on Friday, January 26th. These 2 RFPs would be one for preschool through grade 6 and another for grades 7 through 12. Rather than go through the presentation again, I'll just ask if you have any questions or comments related to this now that you've had time to consider it.
Board members? Ms. Sims-Moton?
I just want to just echo, thank you for bringing this back. It was a really good and detailed report previous to this coming back, and I just want to reiterate how important it is to have that preschool at the beginning. As we can get to the beginning, we have less of the intervention we have to do on the end. So I appreciate that being part of this proposal.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Capps?
Yeah, I'm very much in support of this, and I appreciate the timeline that you included in the report and that you're moving swiftly if the board agrees with the funding today, because I think time is of the essence right now with what our students are facing. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we do. The intention is we do want time to, this RSP is really looking at finding a partner that we can construct school-based mental health with. And so we'll need that time from May until August to construct the plan.
If I might add, I think it's probably a good time to hire these positions, just given the outpouring of people wanting to help in this time that we're all going through. And you know, so many therapists I know have been donating their services and wanting to really be part of the community even more. So I hope you get great candidates at this juncture.
Good. Thank you.
Ms. Parker?
Has there been any, obviously this was videotaped and publicized at the last meeting. Have you had any feedback from any of our current providers about this as you've moved forward?
Yes, they are curious, and it's a big change. I mean, there's no way to minimize the fact that some of these partnerships go back 10 and 20 years, and asking folks to start from scratch and reimagine, you know, I am thinking regularly about, good being the enemy of great, and we can't be good enough with mental health for our young people. And so we're looking to build something great. So I met with one of our partnerships and then have heard from a couple others. And this is probably a good time to say that I've set up a pretty, I think what will be a very transparent question and answer process that's going to be done through a Google form and a document that everyone who is applying can review. So that will go online immediately when the RFPs are released, if you approve it.
Anyone else? I was just going to say, I really appreciate this process, the evaluation that initiated and took us to this place of a more comprehensive evidence-based approach to deal with mental health issues with our students. So I think it's a great plan, if I do say so myself. And so moving forward, do we have an action for this motion?
I'll move to approve this mental health request for proposals.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item F7, report on Santa Barbara Junior High School building replacement project and allocation of additional funds. Mr. Hetyoung.
Thank you, Mr. Maswilka, board members. Richard Wordy, our project manager for the district. This is his project. He's very familiar with it, and he will be giving the presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Maswilka, board members. Thank you for your time on this. I'm not sure how well, excuse me, whoop, hold on. Of course, the first thing I do is screw it up. Thank you. Just make sure. That one, perfect. Thank you. Okay, I'm not sure how well you can see this, but there, the faded out design in the back is a graphic representation of the concept for the new building. And we are at the point right now, just to bring you up to speed, where we have recently gone to the Santa Barbara Historic Commission and received comments on the design. The architect is addressing some of those design comments, and we're at the point of getting ready to finalize those design changes and the architectural elements and resubmit for their input. And we're at the point right now where we're starting to work with the lease-back contractor to get their input into the design for constructability. Now, the building in question that we're looking at replacing, there are two of them. One is the kitchen, existing NPR room, which is the L-shaped building, and then the rectangular building closer to the field is the existing locker rooms. Existing locker rooms are part of the original construction, 1930s construction, and then the NPR room, I believe, was late 60s, early 70s in its construction. So part of the design process, we have started to look into various elements of the site that have brought up some design challenges. The biggest being that we have now been designated for that school site to fully include all of the property within the 100-year floodplain. That FEMA had updated floodplain maps for the city of Santa Barbara in 2015. And the next slide graphic will show that in a little bit more comprehensive identification, excuse me. So part of what is happening with that extended floodplain is that there's an anticipated level due to the existing elevation of the school site that we would need to withstand 3.5 to 4 feet of flood water. So that building would need to be at least 5 feet higher in elevation. So if you look at this map, the junior high is up in the corner here, up here, and you can see there's a kind of a green finger that goes out towards Melba Street, and that was the original portion of the campus that was in that 2012 floodplain map. So not all of the campus was in it, and when it was updated, they've extended that all the way up to Cannon Bernardo Street as potential.
Hey, Richard, we can hear you, but the people on TV can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot I was being recorded. So this graphic shows the expansion in that floodplain that the FEMA is asking us to plan for the city of Santa Barbara. And you'll notice that there are a couple of other colors, little areas around. They are also low-lying areas, but those are areas that would normally be potential flooding of anywhere from 8 to 10 inches, I believe, for the yellow spaces, and the red spaces are anywhere up to 1 foot to 18 inches. So that will help you with the graphic there. Second design challenge, geologic. The site history of this property in the city of Santa Barbara is that it was originally swampland. And in the 20s and 30s, that land was reclaimed by the city. It was drained, and that land became a city dump. And in the 20s and 30s, it, of course, was used as the dump and eventually filled in and reclaimed the land again, building on top of it. That land became Ortega Park and our school site. We have a geotechnical hazard and testing report as part of our due diligence in the project. We are looking for identifiable risks and looking at the existing soils conditions so we know how to build the building appropriately. And from that report, there were other issues that came up where, because of the land being reclaimed, we have to go down further to reach bedrock or a stable substrate to attach the new building to. And then we also have the design requirements for the existing conditions. So, sorry, that's what I was just speaking about being able to get to that stable soil to build from. Okay, this is a schematic of the proposed floor plan for the new building. As you can see, on the left-hand side is the new lockers, new locker rooms, restrooms, and then opens up into a multi-purpose room area, which is dual use as also the NPR room, and where they would be serving lunch. There would be fold-down tables like we have in a lot of the other NPR rooms and the existing NPR room. And on the far end is the kitchen and serving area. And that is replicating basically the same functions that they have in the existing kitchen. So some of the design solutions that we're looking at with those particular challenges that I spoke about earlier was the fact that we need to elevate the building. So there'll be a new series of ADA compatible ramps and steps around the building to get into the building at the main entrances, especially on the basically all four sides of the building will either have a ramp and stairs combination to be able to get in and out. And let me see, second item. The courtyard entrance will provide additional seating for students, so they have an outside area to eat lunch and congregate at. There is a point of sale window to sell food directly out to the courtyard. That's part of the design. The locker room steps will also be utilized by staff to stage the PE classes. So we're not running into a bottleneck for getting classes in and out and changed. This is an item that we had worked with the principal and the athletic staff on helping to deal with their problem of getting kids in and out efficiently. The ramps at the kitchen area will also allow delivery and transportation of supplies and prepared foods. So working with Nancy Weiss, we've looked at the setting those ramps and loading, offloading areas so it'll be easier for them to just get out of the truck with a dolly and be able to go right into the building. In addition to other deliveries can come up the ramps and right in. So we've tried to optimize that design to take advantage of that. The entrance of the building will have ADA compliant ramp for student staff with access and functional needs. So there will be, as we said, access and functional needs at every entrance.
Let me insert a comment here. Principal Garcia really wanted an outdoor amphitheater feel to this, and when it was, prior to all this discovery, We thought, well, okay, maybe we'll be able to figure it out. Well, now we do have it. It's just costing 10 times more than, yeah, it's 10 times more than what we were starting to think about. So I just realized that second point. Oh, he's going to get his amphitheater. It's going to look like a Parthenon, you know, building lifted up, steps, like, it'll be beautiful.
Okay. So, the fiscal impact, as Mr. Matsuoka had started to allude to. You'll see the original budgets within the bond measures. For the cafe kitchen, NPR was one project, and the locker room was a separate project. And the total for those two is $9,524,809. The additional scope is currently estimated to be $4.3 million, and that is for raising the building and also putting in the structural elements to get down to the bedrock to make that happen. And this is a estimate that is including soft costs for the project that are estimated in this. So when we propose this as a total, that's what we're estimating at this point. So that is our revised estimate for the total project, is $13,824,809.
All righty then. Board members. Ms. Parker.
I want to note that just a few days ago, I was talking with a representative from Crane School in Montecito, and 3 years ago, they were finishing design on a major project, and at the last minute, new FEMA flood map came out, which turned around, and they had to make major changes and raise their buildings. They're so grateful that that happened, and new respect for what that floodplain can mean. And so I have great respect for that as well. And I see that we have to do it. And the scope of cost is horrifying. And to me, I mean, I know it means when you attach the list of planned costs for the other buildings. Obviously, there's some things that we will end up having to knock off, and that's really disappointing. But I do know that this is, in terms of the bond, one of the more major projects that needed to have happen, and it needs to be done in a way that means that we don't lose the building in the future, and we don't lose students in the future. So I'm sorry, but and I'm sorry for all of us, and I'm sorry for the district in terms of what will end up not happening. I am grateful that we're doing what's best for students ultimately.
Thank you. Ms. Capps.
Yeah, I certainly have every intention to support making sure that our buildings are flood safe. I mean, could we? Of course, but I just question, I mean, the timing, and as a new person on the board, it's a fairly often thing, and I get it, that plans get revised, but the FEMA map was in 2015. I guess the question is sort of why wasn't that originally? And I do think it's particularly important when we are using bond funds that voters have approved, although they didn't approve every line item, but why didn't we know this prior, given that the flood map was 2015, or do they come out later? Or if you could just sort of explain and elaborate that'd be helpful.
FEMA periodically updates their maps, and unfortunately we don't have control over when they do. I believe that Katrina and some of the other major storms that have happened on the East Coast have driven them to make that update throughout the United States. As far as the original concept for all of the projects that are listed on all of the bonds, I don't have, I could ask Mr. Hetjonk regarding the concept for these projects and see if he has any of the information.
Great.
What we do when we prepare for a bond issue is go through and prepare estimates based on what we know at that time. Typically, once you assign a design team, they look into the specifics and civil engineers will then look at this map, and then they'll look at the topography and the elevations of the existing buildings, and they will come and tell us what height this building needs to be at. For this particular project, the civil and structural engineers are in-house, part of the architects team, and in hindsight, we probably should have had them do their part earlier in the design project rather than coinciding, but we're on such a fast track, we really didn't have the luxury of having all of the civil design looked at first until the architect, wait on the design, because the longer we wait, the more money it costs. So we're kind of moving forward with different parts of design at the same time, and that's the best explanation I can give.
I think having been part of 2 bond program on the front end, this one I read, the list of projects was already set, but school districts don't have a lot of time, nor do you want to spend a lot of money doing a detailed sort of conceptual design cost model. A lot of this was how big, we have a rough idea of cost per square foot. That's probably what led to these budget placeholders. So yeah, we could have seen this in advance. Now I know, okay, any project in this area, we have to be really thoughtful, and we would have. I don't know that I would have anticipated that it would have increased the cost this much. Yeah, the floodplain is compounded with the soil liquefaction issue. Yeah, it's a good question. We just need to be looking ahead all the time.
And it'd be interesting to see the flood map for the rest of the projects coming forward. And I just have to add, of all places on a campus, I have to remember that was where I had my first dance and ate lunch every day. It's the place where kids are the most during the day, and so it's reassuring to know that they'll be lifted up on this very safe structure. So I'm certainly not questioning the validity of the safety, just was questioning the timing a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sims-Martin?
Yes, so given the fact that I have 2 questions. So this additional $4.3 million, how did that impact our reserve? And probably decrease that. So is the 5.9 that's on that sheet, that's minus that 4.3, or so that's the remaining? Okay. And then my second question is, just given the resolution we just looked at and the fact that we probably have to drop off some of the projects due to this, are we able to pick them up if the state were to fast track those bonds?
Currently, we are not anticipating dropping any projects as this increase is being taken out of that $5.9 million reserve. Once we receive additional funds, they go into the pot and would come to the board with our recommendation for allocating those funds for projects. Currently, the only funds we've received lately was the Peabody Stadium money, which is now in the bank for that project, or I should say at the county treasurer.
Okay, so the 5.9 here, we're going to reduce that by 4.3, so leaving us 1.6 or so.
Correct.
Okay. Well, we can't take too much more of this.
Right. There are the resolution withstanding that the board adopted. There are funds on their way for measure, was it Q and measure Q&R. So these were bonds from a while ago. We're watching where they are in the queue for us to actually receive cash. So they're in the line. They're actually getting closer to being, executed as cash. We don't want to bring that to the board until we've got, we've received it. But, we see some funds coming from that, and that will sort of replenish this reserve. Those will kind of get split between the elementary program and the secondary. So right now, all of our project lists will stay intact. But to your point, we can't absorb too many more of these hits.
All right, well, it's interesting that we keep finding things underground, don't we? And so really, I agree with my colleagues about the safety issue and that it needs to be done, but I also want to speak to Ms. Capps' comment, and now that we have these understandings that seem to pop up, I think it would be really in our best interest to really look at the floodplains and look at these situations when we know in advance that we're going to be working on these various projects, so that we don't find ourselves in a situation like this. So knowing that we have these coming down the pike, that perhaps we might sort of get a sense of what's going on down there. So, yes, Ms. Capps.
Just a different topic, you might not be surprised, Mr. Matsuoka and Mr. Hetyank. Is this the area in which you're thinking about solarizing, given that the buildings need to be solar ready anyway?
That is correct. We are making the building solar ready and making plans to include that with the project.
So that's incorporated in those estimates? Enough.
I don't know that we've gotten to that
detail.
point. We've given the architects direction, get this building ready to hold solar panels. I don't know that we've said, okay, give us the cost model to do that. But, news today about, solar panel levies, that's a different issue. But the cost of putting solar on buildings today is so much less. So we're going to build it into the budget. It's not going to affect a number that big.
Great.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you.
So, and I also appreciate the listing of all the projects. I thought that was really great to have that alongside giving us the history and what's going forward. So thank you for that. So any more board comments? All right. So I need an action on this item.
I move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So before moving to our report and discussion section, it is customary for our board to take a break prior to coming back and doing the reports. So I'm going to adjourn the meeting for about 5 minutes, and you can listen to a little music. We are going to move on to our report discussion agenda. And our first item, G1, the report about our work in transforming the lives of students with characteristics of dyslexia. Mr. Matsuoka.
We have been prepared to deliver this report, feels like, for about 3 months. We got it ready, and then it got bumped by some long meetings in the fall, and then another long meeting, and then the fire, and then the mud, and busy schedules. So I'm glad that we finally get to deliver this, because we're really excited to share what's been happening. This small little pilot program, the results that we're seeing, and our plans to scale. So we're glad to present this report. It's going to be a team, and the names of people are in the slide deck. So if Mr. Rouse could pull up the slides. And first up, I believe, is Dr. Butterfield. Do you remember Dr. Butterfield? She looked a little surprised. So as she walks up board, this is Dr. Juris Butterfield. She is the director of our Santa Barbara County SELPA. She's looking forward to a change in her occupation soon. She's been serving as a SELPA director for a decade. She's an expert in this space of dyslexia, English language learners, literacy. She's really a gift to us and to, like, all of our students. So she's going to give an overview of the whole field of dyslexia, and then I'll have Ms. Kroc come up and share our theory of action, and she'll share her work. So.
Okay, I'm going to give you a very brief overview because Claire is the star of the show, and she's going to really tell you about the exciting things that have been happening. But as many of you probably know, AB 1369 was passed, which mandated that the state of California draft a guidance book in the area of dyslexia. Wasn't for special education, it was just a book on dyslexia and how to address dyslexia. We had a very active advocacy group or groups here in California that were the driving force behind that book. I actually think that it was very, very helpful. A lot of states have guideline books, but they don't have to pass legislation to get them in the area of dyslexia. But we're a state that kind of has to rely on legislation to do such things. So anyway, the book came out in August of 2017. Santa Barbara actually did some trainings on AB 1369. I assisted in that effort, as well as some other presenters. They are guidelines, they are not mandates. I have to compliment Santa Barbara Unified School District. They were the first of my 24 districts or LEAs that really got on the bandwagon, Mr. Matsuoka, and his efforts in saying, I'm going to do this and I'm going to address this and I'm going to do it now and not wait around and see what everybody else is doing. So with that said, the project that you're going to hear about tonight got started. We know that there's a lot of dyslexia out there, and for purposes of clarification and special education and not to confuse people, we're referring to characteristics of dyslexia before a student gets identified, even though we know that students, many of them with mild dyslexia, are out in our general population. We know that the statistics are 15 to 20%, depending on what study you read. So just to clarify that, because dyslexia we know, I tend to just go on and not pay attention to my slides. So we know that dyslexia is another word also because it's under the umbrella of a specific learning disability. And that's why we're kind of delineating and clarifying when we use the term. But I'm proud that our districts here in Santa Barbara County have chosen to use the word dyslexia. We're not afraid of the word dyslexia. And with that, we in Santa Barbara Unified School District, I've been sitting on a committee that meets weekly on a Friday afternoon to talk about ways that we can improve and support students who manifest these characteristics of dyslexia at the elementary level before they then engage in that wait to fall model and need special education, because the research shows, and this is my favorite statistic, that if we remediate dyslexia at the lower elementary level versus waiting until 4th grade, because that's typically when you're going to get that discrepancy and qualify for special education. And we know dyslexia is a specific learning disability, pulling out reading comprehension explicitly. We know that the students will take 4 times as long to remediate. The research is clear on that, if we wait until they're in the 4th grade or meet that discrepancy. So that's why I applaud the efforts of the Santa Barbara Unified School District. So some of the questions that had to be addressed. Some of the questions that needed to be addressed is what setting? Is this a pullout? Is it going to be within the context of the classroom, gen ed? And I'm a believer that whatever you name it or call it, you've got to group students, and the research will tell you that. 1 to 3 if it's going to be an intensive intervention that really makes a difference. So to do that, you've either got to go in the back of the room or you've got to pull out to a quiet environment. So even though I'm very much about inclusive education, I think when it comes to remediating dyslexia, it's important that we somehow group those students and be able to deliver that instruction in a very small, quiet environment. So those were some of the questions that were asked. Who delivers the instruction? What credentials do they need? What training do they need? And the big question is, how many students can we serve at a time? 1 to 3 is pretty intensive. Both financially as well as resource, finding the folks that have the training and can do that and serve the many students that need served. So I'm going to turn it over to Claire now and let her present.
So as Claire Kroc comes up, Claire joined us from nearby Hope Elementary School District. She was a longtime teacher in that district, I think 17 years. And so just a very, very veteran, experienced elementary teacher. And she met with me about only 11 months ago with this idea. And so to watch it come to fruition has been a real gift. And so she's going to share the specifics of the model. She is the implementer at Harding, and at the right time, we'll weave in the video. So I'll let you decide when you want to show your video.
Okay, sounds good. So as Juris mentioned, we did decide to create a pull-out model, and I'm staffed in there. I do see students 1 to 3, and I see them 4 to 5 days a week. We did decide to start with the primary grades, where we started with first, second, and third graders. And our first step in getting the program up and running was to do a universal screener of all the students around literacy and identify students who were having difficulty with reading. Once we did that, we then took the next step and did a more in-depth screener, then to decide the students that were showing characteristics of dyslexia. When we created this, this slide deck, it was back in November, so at that time, instruction had been in place for about 10 weeks, and all of the data that you're going to see in all of the slides is from that period of time. I see about 18 to 21 students a day, depending on the day. So all of the students included in this report are first through third graders. They've received between 5 and 25 hours of intervention, but most of them were about 20 to 25 hours. The students that were selected were in this program because they were performing far below their peers in reading and demonstrating characteristics of dyslexia. So the initial assessment that I gave was the BPST, which stands for the Basic Phonics Skills Test, and it's a quick look at phonics skills. The students have to learn phonics rules in order to break the reading code, and you can see across the bottom are the students, and the blue are their scores in September, and then the red are their scores on the same assessment in November. So you can see that everyone's skills in phonics increased in that 10 weeks of instruction. This is data from the more in-depth assessment, the Project READ assessment that Juris Butterfield put together. It's from a Orton Gillingham program, and it's a more in-depth assessment than the BPST. It gives students about 15 words per each phonics skill. And again, these are all the first graders, and the first graders received about 25 hours of intervention, and the blue was their fall score. And you can see they came in knowing very little. They basically knew their letter names, some letter sounds, and could do a couple of short vowel words. And then by the November assessment, they were able to do quite a lot more than they were originally. The next slide are the second graders, and on the same assessment, the Project READ assessment, and their deficit, they came in with similar skills to the first graders, but because they're in second grade, they were much further behind their peers. So again, their blue is in fall, and by November, they had gained a multitude of skills, and were feeling really successful.
Before you move on, just want to point out, because I asked this question, so there's a lot of those red bars, and there's no blue next to it. It's because they were at 0.
Right.
So any red bar by itself is they've gone from baseline to that number.
And then the third graders are next, and again, they came in with a small amount of skills and gained many over those first 10 weeks. The next slide looks at sight words, which is another big component of the program, and sight words are important so that students learn how to read fluently. A lot of the students, when they came in September, had very few sight words mastered, which meant they really weren't fluent readers at all. And just in those 10 weeks, we were able to put a few sight words in their pocket and give them some tools so they weren't having to sound out every single word and every single page. And this graph, it looks at the third piece of reading, which is fluency, which is the act of actually reading text. And this is the last skill to grow. When the program started, I did not assess my students on fluency because most of my students were non-readers. We really worked on building confidence and building success, and I gave this first assessment in October, and you can see the students they could read a couple of words per minute, but just in 1 month, this was the growth that they made. And I wish I could show you the slide of today, and they are just flying on their fluency right now because they've gotten so many of those other skills in their pocket as well. So another question we asked when we started the program was looking at how dyslexia and English language learning go together. And as the program progressed, we saw some students who accelerated at very fast rates, who were moving faster than the rest of the group. And the conclusion that I came to was that these were English language learners who did really well with this intensive intervention, but they actually really didn't have the characteristics of dyslexia. So once they made it through that first session, I decided to move them back to a Tier 2 setting because we have a Tier 2 reading instructor at Harding, and she's delivering a little less intensive but still getting reading intervention weekly. And this freed up more space to add more kids to the program because I just keep trying to add as many as I can. And observations is all of our groups have made significant growth in just those first 2 months, and the growth is continuing. It's really amazing that we should serve our English language learners with Tier 1 and Tier 2 levels of support, and that it's important that we give each child exactly what they need, and that not every tool is the right tool. We have to make sure we have a deep toolbox and we meet each of these learners with what they need. So with that, I think we should show the video of what's been happening in the classroom.
I see kids 4 to 5 days a week for sessions of 45 minutes each time. I work with 3 kids at a time. I see 15 to 18 students every day. We really make sure that we're using multi-sensory methods to teach the children. We do everything visually, kinesthetically, auditorily, and tactily, and make sure that they're getting the information through all of their senses so that it will move to their long-term memory. FL says full, GL, goal,
Thanks. And I think next up on the slide deck is Mrs. Binkley. Come on up.
Wow, how lucky are we, right? That was an amazing video. It choked me up watching how much those kids have grown. So this program has really effectively allowed Harding to complete a multi-tiered system of support for reading. As a site, we've been committed to a balanced literacy approach that's systematic and data-driven. We've built in daily protected classroom time. We have push-in teachers that go into the classroom every day so that there's 2 instructors in the room. We have, as Claire was saying, a Tier 2 model, but we never had that third layer that Claire is bringing. And her program enables us to really catch those kids who in the past would not have made progress in their core classroom, and even with that double dose they would have effectively been referred to the student study team and probably would have qualified for special education. So there's 27 kids that she's worked with so far this year. All of those 27 children are reading, and that wouldn't have happened last year. Students love coming to her room. When they go to her room, you know, they're excited, they can't wait. In fact, I was walking through the hall one day and there was a little girl who was telling her friend, that's the room where kids learn to read. So this program has done 3 tremendous things for Harding. 27 students who their whole academic career have struggled. They're reading. That's huge. And not only that, Claire shares her best practice with our literacy team, so those other teachers that are in the classroom to push in during Tier 1 are using the strategies that Juris and Claire have brought to Harding. And it's trickling down because the teachers are watching them do this as well, so the teachers are using the strategies. So the best practice is just becoming exponential. And then we have really been able to intervene and mitigate special education referrals. So far this year, we have referred 2 students to special education to be assessed. And it was without a doubt they have a learning, we feel they have a learning disability because we have so much data to back up what they know and they don't know. So I'm so grateful and endorse this program wholeheartedly. She and we are changing lives, and it's a beautiful thing. Is there more? Yes.
I'll cover this slide for Ms. Curry. So this program that was set up at Harding is serving gen ed students who, in our history in our district, will become special ed students. Now, we have started asking the question, how do we serve students in special ed who have the irony, their learning disability. It's called specific learning disability, which is a catch-all for a whole bunch of, qualifications. So we are starting to think about how do we start serving both gen ed and special ed students in future iterations. We haven't tested a model around that, but it would mean scaling up capacity, because Claire is serving, at any given time, she can only serve 21 kids. And that's a full day. It's 3 kids, 45 minutes times, she's teaching, 6 or 7 blocks. We've got to figure out how to bring in the special ed support, but we actually see a hybrid model. We need to design that and then test that next year. We are wrestling with the funding of that. If it's a special ed funded teacher, that helps on the credentialing side. We've got to work through some of the nuances of special ed law, who's the case manager, all of that. And so we always turn to Juris and just say, okay, can we do this? Or, how do we set this up so that we're meeting the demands of IEPs? So just know that we've got a future design question about how do we serve the many students who are identified with a disability, and it's a reading disability, and how do we support them? Because they're in our schools, and especially when they get to junior high and high school, it's a tough experience for them. So that's that part. Now the question is, if it's working at Harding, how do we expand? So that question started emerging in the fall, like how do we expand and how fast? And so this keeps changing about once a month. Okay. So let me comment about what's been in motion at Santa Barbara High School. There is a reading center in place there, and it's been a good start. There's a person who's supporting kids, purely special ed students, who have issues with reading. And so progress has been made. We're going to fold that effort under this larger umbrella. But we want to add this model at 2 more elementary schools. The specifics are we're looking at McKinley and Monroe, just for a whole bunch of reasons. And then we really need to figure out how to do this in the secondary spaces. So we're thinking Santa Barbara Junior High, and then obviously Santa Barbara High School. Dr. Butterfield, we've been having conversations the last probably 4 weeks now. How do you do a secondary version of this? It is going to be a pull-out model, but now you're dealing with the master schedule. And that's kind of complicated. But we had a really productive design meeting. We think we've got a model designed. We've got to work closely with the special ed staff, both at the district and at the site level, because these kids have to come in sort of, I guess, ranges that are reasonable for the specialist to address. If they are all over the map on literacy, it would be too hard to work with a group of 3. So we actually have to screen them this spring and then build a special ed master schedule that lets us pull them in the right sets. So we're going to test it at the junior high. We're going to expand at the elementary school. So then we'd have a work in place in 5 schools. Now, I know the need is at all 18 of our schools, but we have to be really careful with quality. This has been just a very, very supervised piece of work. Dr. Butterfield will be retired from her SELPA role, and she's going to come work with us, as we've shared with the board in the past, and she's going to be really a technical advisor and an instructional coach. And we also see Claire, both teaching, but she's got an interest in starting to do program leadership and instructional coaching. I mean, imagine where this thing could be in a year or 2 years down the road, where it goes from 5 schools to more. Funding it's a big question. It's a challenge. I think we can absorb this much, but just know that SBEF is starting to make this one of their signature visions of supporting literacy in our district. The HOPE Awards are going to be geared around literacy and personalized learning. So I meet monthly with Margie Ayabi, and she's making progress on the fundraising side. So I think we'll get some support from the local community, but we have to be prepared to hold the lion's share of financial support. I came to this topic, there were many things that led us and me specifically to dive into this. Our special ed needs are broad, students with dyslexia. What I've learned, there's a section in that guidebook, the mental health cost of a student who can't read in junior high and high school. It's immense. And so the human toll on these students is almost the bigger cost than the financial. And you all know students, friends, family who just have wrestled with dyslexia. Honestly, it was the stories of 2 people in this room that finally said, we need to do something about this. And so to hear the stories at Harding is, it's tremendous. So that's the plan. We're going to scale up next year. The 4 positions are posted as of 2 days ago. And so we're looking to interview and hire in about a month. So, questions or comments?
Yes. So I just have to say that this is really exciting. And when we think about a year ago, December 2016, when you outlined the challenge that we faced, what are we going to do with the over-identification of English language learners, and what are we going to do about the issue with dyslexia? And remarkably, but not so remarkably, because we have an amazing team that came together. I had the opportunity to meet with Ms. Kroc and actually sort of see what was going on and learn from her the passion behind why she so wants this and why she does such an amazing job in what she does. But I think what's so important about this is there's a clear team effort. There is a defined plan. There is an implementation process that is like set in a framework that can be replicated, that we can see in a short time frame, in just 10 weeks, dramatic changes, just from those charts, that we're seeing the movement of ELL students being served and being moved where they need to be to get what they need in terms of their support. And also, I think it's exciting to really think about our secondary piece, because we have to start from elementary, we have to catch it early on, but we have students that are suffering now and need to be supported in the secondary level. And so I feel really strongly that we need to have that other tier, that strategic plan in the junior high and high school level to really make sure that we can bring together and make this come together and meet to meet these challenges. So I commend you, and I think it's exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing how we can move forward with it. Does anyone else want to say anything? Ms. Parker.
Yes, thank you, and I'll second that on the secondary schools. My hope is, in the long run, of course, that the majority of cases will be remediated at the elementary setting, and it's kind of different types of supports for our dyslexic students in the secondary level that will ultimately be where we are hopefully at. But obviously, that's not where we are right now. So I think it's great that you're expanding it up in terms of testing how it could work at the junior high level. One question I had is, how was this messaged to the parents of students that are in the program in ways that I hope that they could figure out how they can support their students outside of whatever intervention is going on with Ms. Kroc? So I don't know if somebody can address that.
Yes, you have to go back to the microphone.
So we notified all parents, once we had gone through the screening process and had figured out what group of students I was going to see, we sent home a parent notification letter that let them know that they would be receiving intensive reading support, and they had been identified as having a deficit in their reading skills, and that they would be receiving intensive reading support for 4 to 5 days a week for, we said, for one session at that time, and then it has continued since then.
I guess one question I have, because it was said earlier that there was no fear on the district's part to use the word dyslexia. Sure. And so oftentimes, it can be frustrating for the board when we're talking about students that are identified as special ed, and it's just that specific learning disability that's so generic. And parents can go on with this term, specific learning disability, without actually understanding that their children have the characteristics of dyslexia.
Right.
So I don't know, were those parents actually, did that word get used with parents?
We have not written that on the letter yet. That could be something we could look at in the future. For this pilot, we just went for targeted reading intervention. But that could be something that we look at in the future as we move forward.
I hope that we do, because I think on the parent side that it's not ethical, ultimately, for them not to understand that about their children. Even though I understand why it's a little, it really is a little scary on the district side. But I think that ultimately you can do so much more as a family and be so much more understanding of your children and what they need if you fully get the picture. So I hope that we move that way in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Any other board comments? Ms. Capps?
You have to come up to the microphone to speak.
I'm just going to stay here.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to remind everyone that our teachers are very communicative with the parents, and all of these parents were very well aware that their students were struggling with reading and the components of reading. And while they are demonstrating dyslexia-like tendencies, they've not essentially been diagnosed. And so, we could go down that road, but I think it was intentionally sort of, the parents were led to believe that we're just helping them fill gaps with a specialist. And she's known as a dyslexia specialist, so just wanted to clarify that a little bit.
And Ms. Parker, I really appreciate the comment, because until you name it, how do you address it? But we are wrestling with this question every week about if we name it, but we haven't formally assessed, we're actually jumping ahead of, putting a name to it. So it's something we're struggling with, but it's a good struggle, honestly. I think you can tell we're not afraid of the struggle. We just don't want to get ourselves into excessive, dilemmas. So I hope this field just, people are more comfortable talking about it over time.
Ms. Capps?
Yeah, I really appreciate your work. Thank you. I'm in the zone having a first grader, so we're learning to read, and so I really just seeing the video and knowing what kind of day you have every day, or not knowing, but imagining what you go through every day. It's just so important. My question, and I don't think there's any advocates here, but I just was curious what the feedback has been from Sherry Ray and other advocates. If you can speak to that, Carrie, maybe, or because I know how valuable their opinion is, and I'm hoping that they're receptive to all this good work.
I think the best moment was there was a community gathering at the public library last, I forget, November. And I don't think we quite had the data, but we had the model built, and so we both shared. And the feedback was, some of the comments were, thank you, it's about time, gratefulness, and then questions like how are we going to scale? So that was 2 months ago. So I would say the dyslexia community is certainly aware of what we're doing, and I think we have a future partnership with the public library. In fact, we've got a meeting, we're trying to get it on the calendar, because they've got money and resources. They've got adult volunteers. We just have to figure out how to be really a technical advisor to them, so that the services of these volunteers is just really well done. So.
Anything else? Is it Dr. Schwartzberg? Bev
Yeah.
Didn't she just get honored? Wasn't she honored for something? I thought around that. Okay, I'm not sure.
Yeah, so our contact is Bev Schwartzberg at the library.
All right. Well, thank you very much. So now we will move on to item G2, strategies to support first-generation college-bound students. Ms. Carey.
Good evening, President Reed. That's the first time I said that, and board members and Mr. Matsuoka. I'm really thrilled to be here and introducing this item. I know that there's a lot of prior knowledge in the room about AVID and about PEAK, but I also know that being the illustrious, and in the case of PEAK, the really unique programs that they are, that it bears reminding ourselves annually about what is so extraordinary about these assets in our district. So I will not take very long up here, and I will be introducing to you Dr. Patricia Madrigal, who's the coordinator for PEAK, and Mr. Rob Schiff, who teaches AVID classes and also serves as the district's AVID coordinator. I know you've heard from Dr. Madrigal before, as she gives an annual report on PEAK outcomes, but I'm particularly excited this year about the fact that I think we've had some unprecedented collaboration between the AVID and PEAK program over the last 12 months, and particularly the last 6. And so they're really well aligned. They're actually very much entwined with each other in their efforts, and so that articulation has been fruitful and really positive. I know you're about to hear some really compelling quantitative and qualitative information, and that includes student voices, and I also see some principals in the room and some other program coordinators and just general fans of AVID and PEAK. So we'll have lots of us on hand to answer any questions that you might have after they present. So welcome, Mr. Schiff. And Dr. Madrigal.
Thank you, Ms. Carey. It is my pleasure and honor to represent AVID here tonight. My job, as Sean said, is a little bit unique in that I'm a 40% teacher and 60% TOSA, coordinating the AVID program. This is my second year doing it, and it's been really a pleasure working with Dr. Ramirez and and Miss Carrie, who was previously my boss. So she's now my 60% boss, which is cool. But it is an honor to represent AVID. I've done a lot of different things in my educational career and taught and coached various things. And I can honestly say that being involved in AVID is the most rewarding thing I've done in education. And I'm proud that some of my current students are actually here representing us tonight. AVID was started in 1980. I just thought like a brief history. There was a high school teacher in San Diego that realized that certain groups of her students were bright and hardworking and going to college, and there were other groups of her students who were bright and hardworking and not going to college. And so she created AVID, Advancement via Individual Determination, to try to attack that issue. AVID in our school district is divided into two different programs, AVID Elementary and AVID Secondary. So I'll give you a little bit of overview of both. There's a few differences. AVID Elementary goes to everybody in grades 4 through 6 at our elementary schools. So AVID strategies and curriculum are embedded in all the subject areas. And so everyone gets AVID, grades 4 through 6. An exception is Franklin School, which is our showcase school. They actually start AVID in first grade, which is pretty amazing. So people from all over the place come and look at Franklin, and AVID is embedded in everything that they do. And it's pretty impressive if you ever get a chance to go look. Everything in AVID Elementary and Secondary, all the strategies and all the curriculum are basically under the umbrella of WICR. So writing, inquiry, collaboration, organization, and reading to learn. In the elementary, I'd say there's definitely a heavy focus on the organizational part of it too. If you picture kids going from kindergarten through 6th grade in basically one classroom a year, and then all of a sudden going to 6 or 7 different classrooms. If you aren't organized, can't keep an agenda, a binder with multiple tabs, paper or electronic, secondary school will be an uphill battle. So we try to prepare our kids the best that we can. One nice recent development in AVID Elementary is we now have a teacher who's able to train. So AVID training is world-renowned as excellent. It's also, however, not inexpensive. And so we now have Mary Gish, who's a 2nd grade teacher at Franklin, that can now do at least the first year of training for our staff. So that's actually really helpful. For AVID Secondary, it becomes an elective program. Serving 12 to 18% of the kids, usually about 15% of the kids at our secondary schools are in the AVID elective. They have a different teacher in 7th and 8th grade, and then in high school they stay with the same teacher for 4 years. So AVID is successful for a number of reasons. I think the primary one being the relationships that we can build with our students, strong, positive, trusting, loving relationships with our kids. I think of these kids as my kids. They're juniors now. And there's a need in our community to serve historically underserved populations, and that's what AVID does. AVID students are a combination of, as it says there, students from historically underserved backgrounds, low-income families, little or no history of college, a focus on students in the middle, kids that are decent students, but we get the idea that with some help and support, they could be great students, excellent students. So we encourage them to we actually required them to take higher level classes. They take honors, AP, IB, Santa Barbara City College dual enrollment classes, and they go on to college and they become successful young people. Another big part of our secondary or high school program is the college field trips. So actually getting to set foot on college campuses is an amazing experience. They usually see 1 or 2 schools in 9th grade, 6 or 8 in 10th grade, and then 9 to 12 generally in their junior year. So just seeing them, picturing themselves there is kind of an amazing thing to see. As I said, everything we do in AVID is kind of creating a family. What we're really trying to do is to have them change the trajectory of possibilities for themselves and their families forever, and that's neither minor nor simple, but they do it. There's all kinds of pieces of data which are important. How many higher level classes do they take? What's the college acceptance rate? What's the GPA? All kinds of different things. The one that really matters for us, though, is do the kids go to college, and do they finish with a minimum of a bachelor's degree? So in doing some research, one of the things that stood out to me is that 80% of our AVID graduates enroll in college the fall after graduating, and then 3 years later, 90% of those are still in college. And research shows that once you start your junior year, really only about 10% of kids drop out. So that was really impressive, and I think it just speaks to the strength of our program and our kids. These are kind of our goals and our vision for the future. We know that our AVID program is strong. Of course, we want to just continue to build it. One of our continuing needs is training teachers. As I said, it's not inexpensive, so that's kind of an ongoing need that we're trying to address each year. And at this point, I think I'll turn it over to my lovely student, Miss Pamela Delgado.
Hello, my name is Pamela Delgado, and I'm currently in the 11th grade AVID class with Mr. Schiff at Dos Pueblos High School. I've been in AVID for about 5 years, and I wouldn't change anything about those 5 years. I was first put into the AVID program when I was in 7th grade. I didn't know what the program was about or why I was in it. I didn't choose to be there. It was about until my second day of school, which was when our former AVID teacher told us that the reason why some of us were in there, even if we didn't choose to be there, was because someone believed in us. Someone knew we had the potential to get far in life. And that's when I knew I belonged there. 5 years later, I'm very glad that someone placed me in AVID. I'm glad that someone believed in me, because AVID is more than just a place for someone that wants something more in life. It is a safe place. It is a place where everyone feels important, regardless of what they are facing outside. It is a place where we challenge ourselves by taking higher level classes, something most of us have never done. It is a place where we get into study groups and we help each other understand and process the information that has been given to us in those higher level classes. It is a place where we get into circles to talk about our stresses when it is necessary. It is a place where we are taught that the sky's our limit and that there's a whole new world outside of our comfort zone as long as we're willing to explore it. AVID is a place where I met those people that have seen me at my worst and are still here at my best, some of which are here supporting me. AVID is a place where people like me, who have a hardworking mother and father, who are so focused on placing food on our table and food and a roof over our head, want to succeed. It is a place where we are seen regardless of what race we are or what our family income is. It is a place where we are noticed, where we have a home. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. I now have the honor of introducing Dr. Madrigal, and Sean noted that, in the last year or so, there's been a great effort to Peak serves our students in ways that we can't. They provide services for the family and for the kids that are outside of the school day and are amazing, and there's something we couldn't do until Peak came along. So we're so excited that our relationship is growing. The programs are almost completely aligned. 2 more years, basically every AVID kid will be a Peak kid and vice versa in 2 years. And it's just been a wonderfully rewarding experience working with Dr. Madrigal. There she is.
Well, good evening, board members and Superintendent Matsuoka. We gave an update many years ago, actually. At that time, we still had not graduated our first cohort of Peak students, and since then, many great things have happened. We continue as a public-private partnership with about 40% of our funding from the school district and 60% of our funding from foundations and individual donors, as well as our many community partners through nonprofit agencies. In 2015, San Marcos High School received the Gold Ribbon Award from the state for the PEAK program. That same year, we also graduated our first cohort of PEAK students who were all accepted to a four-year university. That is a primary goal of PEAK, of the Program for Effective Access to College, is that our students complete the A through G pathway. At that time, as a school district, we decided to continue to invest in the PEAK program and also expand the supports to Santa Barbara Junior High as well as the first cohort at Santa Barbara High. In 2016, we continued to scale up and support Goleta Valley Junior High, La Colina Junior High, as well as the first cohort of PEAK students at Dos Pueblos High School. We are presently serving approximately 675 students at the high school level, and PEAK is a 7th through 12th grade strategy. And so when we include those supports for our first-generation college-bound students at the 4 junior highs, so then 7th through 12th grade, we're currently serving approximately 1,300 students. Now that will increase, again, when we continue to expand those cohorts at Dos Pueblos High School and Santa Barbara High School. Actually, in 2019, we'll be graduating our first cohort from Santa Barbara High School, and we will be in year 8. Our students continue to excel. One of the primary goals, again, of PEAK is that our students continue on the A through G pathway. And so our students are taking AP classes, honors classes. They are taking rigorous coursework. And it is a goal, in order for them to maintain that on the A through G pathway, for them to continue at a 3.0 GPA or higher. Our students, when compared to their peers from the same demographics, yet not necessarily taking AP classes, our students are doing incredibly well and have a 3.0 GPA or higher. We have a friendly competition amongst our students and around GPAs, because they're so proud of their GPAs. And last year, our 11th grade cohort from San Marcos High School had a combined GPA of 3.9. So they're very excited about that. We actually were able to host him at Soto's through our Friends of PEAK to celebrate. They're very excited about that. Our PEAK model does include 8 strategies, as they were developed by our great leaders, Joanne Keynes and Ed Behrens, who are with us tonight. And that does include academic and social-emotional supports. These are some of the components within the wraparound services that we're able to provide as a school district within our system. And not only is our academic counselor responsible for ensuring that our students are scheduled into cohorts of 6 to 10 in English, math, and science, but this counselor is also responsible for coordinating the model. And what that means is also coordinating parent education and engagement opportunities for the parents of our students, as well as fostering that college-going culture and supporting the partner junior highs. We are very proud of the fact that we are hosting 4 PEAK Learning Centers. We just added our 4th tutoring center in the fall last year at Santa Barbara High School. 2 of our centers were able to host a K through 8 tutoring center, as well as classes, skills building classes for our adults with our partners there, such as City College and others. Our centers are, we do operate our centers from 5 to 7 p.m. with a separate program from, sponsored through our friends at Nutrition Services, and we're able to have, our students are able to have dinner at all of our centers, and that's really wonderful, because what we've learned is that the students, these centers do become a second home for them. Some of our students, our parents do work late, and again, you know, the centers are not remedial tutoring. It is tutoring for the academic rigor. We do have all of our tutors and mentors are college students or college grads, and we also have a math teacher at each of our centers to assist our high school students. I'm very proud of the fact that at least 85% of our mentors and tutors are graduates at Santa Barbara Unified School District, because we continue, again, you know, part of these strategies to continue to invest in our students. And again, this is a great recruitment for recruiting our students to come back and work for us here at Santa Barbara Unified. We also host the Peak Summer Institute, and that includes a 7th grade as well as a 9th grade bridge, 7th grade bridge for each junior high and a 9th grade bridge at each high school. The last 2 years, we were fortunate enough to partner with City College and add a Bridge to College component. And what this means is that our upperclassmen students are able to take classes during the summer for college credit at no cost to them, as well as our graduating 8th graders, which this is really fascinating news. I'm always very enthusiastic about sharing this news. Our graduating 8th graders are able to also be on campus and take a class before they even start high school. And last year we had over 100 graduating 8th graders taking a class at City College and spending time there learning about note-taking, learning about time management, as well as learning about the college culture. Very excited kids. I know that I heard from some of our mentors and some of our counselors who were saying that the students were just really excited and bragging about the fact that they were in college over the summer. So that's really exciting news. We also, one of our greatest strategies is also our Peak Mentors. And our Peak Mentors are not only do they liaison with the parents as well as with the counselor and the teachers, but they also are role models for our students, and they become family to our students. They're really there to support them, but I'd like to actually, I think it'd be great if we'd hear from one of our Peak graduates and current Peak mentors about that experience.
Hi, my name is Jessica Zamora. I am a former Peak student and an AVID student. I actually graduated San Marcos, class of 2015. I was part of the first cohort of Peak to graduate. And it was such a wonderful program for me, I didn't want to leave it behind. So I had the opportunity to continue with the program after graduation as a mentor. So now I'm a mentor. I'm in that role of that person that I had when I was in high school, getting me through it. I have a class of sophomores. It's my second year with them. And like Dr. Madrigal said, you do get really close. I mean, I'm 20 years old, and I say I have 35 children already. But it's such a wonderful job to have because you grow close to these kids. I'm old enough for them to look up to me, but I'm also young enough to relate to them. And my jobs include things like checking their grades, making sure they're not falling behind. I go to their AVID class, which is where they meet during the day every week. I also talk to their counselors and the teachers when I need to, but I also, most importantly, talk to the parents because like Dr. Madrigal said, I am a big connection. Most of these parents work all day. They don't have the time to get to the school, make an appointment with the counselor when it works for them. So they have my email, they can email me, or they can come drop in during tutoring every Monday through Thursday and ask any question they have. And I've had a unique role in this program because I've been in it as a student, but also as an employee. And I've seen the changes, as you guys saw, the academic effects it's had, but I've also witnessed a different effect I don't think anyone had planned, which is this perspective change that happened within my community. As a West Side resident, I've seen the perspective change within students and families where, I'm going to sound 1,000 years old, but it's cool to do well in school now. They're not embarrassed to take these AP classes, these higher education or higher level classes. They're not ashamed of getting A's, and now the arguments they have within each other is who's taking more AP classes and who's getting a higher GPA because, as they mentioned, we have a friendly competition between classes. So they're screaming at each other because one of them's taking one AP class, two of them are taking 3 AP classes, but it's a wonderful thing to see. So I wanted to thank you on behalf of Peak graduates and students. Thank you for investing in us, and thank you for allowing us to reach our full potential. We really appreciate it.
One thing that Jessica didn't mention is that she will be going into the teacher ed program, and so she's very excited about the fact, and we're very enthusiastic about the fact that she's going to come back and work for us. And so it goes back to the fact that we have many of our current tutors and mentors and our peak graduates who have become very enthusiastic about continuing to support Santa Barbara Unified as staff in the future. So that is our next generation of staff for our school district. We've learned, there's so much that we have learned. Every year we learn something new, and we continue to adjust the model to include more supports. And again, we also are very fortunate that we have so much community support, not only as far as our donors, but community partners who are very, very enthusiastic about coming to the centers as mentors and tutors, or to provide services for free for our students and their parents. And so we continue to do this work that we're very passionate about. And at this time, Dr. Reed, I'd like to open it up for questions.
Thank you very much. And just to say that Pam and Jessica, very well spoken and really, really from the heart, and really appreciated your messages. Board members?
And then we all needed Kleenex, including Dr. Madrigal. Nice recovery. I have a question, and maybe it's for Mr. Schiff, especially with the, as Peak has, it sounds like Peak and Avid are on this integration pathway, which is great, because I know that there were a lot of frustrations when Peak first went to San Marcos that it didn't have the Avid component. And so it's nice to see that work being done. Peak has always had a really close connection with City College.
Yeah.
And one of the frustrations I had even a few years ago with Avid was that Avid National was so focused on the four-year university, and understandably, because nationwide the transfer rates for city colleges, community colleges were so low. But of course we had a unique situation here, and now not only do we have a unique situation with a high transfer city college, it's also free for the first 2 years. So I'm wondering how you're talking to your Avid students now about Santa Barbara City College in particular.
Yeah, that's a good question. My students are giggling over here. It is tough because on the one hand, I mean, how do you turn down a free education? Statistics show, and I know City College is doing amazing things. Nationally, a student like ours that attends a 2-year school with the stated intent of eventually transferring and finishing in a 4-year school actually finish at a 7 times higher rate when they go to the 4-year school immediately. Mm-hmm. So it's an individual discussion with each student eventually. I mean, I was talking to my students earlier this year about not defaulting in their minds to City College. Mm-hmm. It's always there as an option. I went there myself, and I finished. But that's a difficult question to answer with a kind of a blanket statement, but it's definitely an issue that it's a nice issue to have. It's a nice option to have, but we still, for the most part, we do encourage our students to at least give the 4-year college or university a shot. And then once we have all the information in, the FAFSA, how much are you getting, how much will it cost, then we can kind of individually make that decision kind of late in senior year. But yes, it's a great option to have, but it makes it a little bit harder in some ways too.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Ms. Sims-Moton?
Yes, I just want to echo the comments of well-spoken and hard to contain over here, in terms of that. And also know the lasting effects of AVID, because my son went through the AVID program, and I actually see his organized notes much more organized than his mom from time to time. And now he's having to, for instance, having to, keep up maintenance on his car, and he's like all this very organized, notes about, yes, I did the oil change. Well, yay, in terms of that. And so I have a couple questions. One, so I noticed that you have the 4th and 6th grade where it's AVID there. Do you find, because they're in the 4th and 6th grade taking it, that since it's an elective in 7th and 12th grade, that 7th through 12th, that they just take it because they've been in 4th and 6th grade?
4th through 6th, so do 4th, 5th,
Yeah.
and 6th. I don't think so. I mean, we have pretty heavy requirements to even stay in the program. You have to have over a 2.5 GPA at all times, or you go on probation. And if it's a second grading period, you might be removed from the program. It's pretty difficult, I would say. So I would say if you're there for just continuation reasons, I don't think a ton of those students would be as successful as ours are.
Yeah, I'm just thinking because they were in it, that they're excited to continue and not just
absolutely.
because it's there.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. The other comment that I wanted to make, and I noticed that you don't necessarily have the breakdown of the students who take this class, and so I'm just speaking from sometimes a population as an African American that we're invisible in this community, and it certainly fall into those categories of first-time college, low socioeconomic areas in terms of that, and so we continue to see those gaps with regards to, achievement gaps, and so I would be interested to know what are your outreach, and I know that's a community and population that's hard to outreach, particularly because it's so small, but it's really important to reach out to those parents, and I know the challenge of some of that doing, but what are your outreach efforts to do that and to get them into these type of programs?
That's a really good question, and it is a difficult population, right? All of our counselors go, from the junior high, they go to all the elementary, our Avid Peak counselors go to each elementary school, reach out, here's this program that's available to you, you can apply for it, it's open to everybody, here are the kind of typical students that enroll in it. And the same thing happens going from 8th grade to 9th grade. Our high school counselors and teachers come down and present to them. And I know Dr. Madrigal is also involved with, heavily involved with the families along those lines. Did you want to cover some?
Sure. The 7th grade bridge is a great outreach tool that we're able to, again, outreach to those families. I've also been in some communication, some preliminary communication with Dr. Ramirez about our peak mentors beginning to spend more time perhaps with those 6th graders in the 6th grade classroom as an outreach tool, and so we hope to be able to begin that very soon. And as well as for at the junior highs, we also invite through our parent engagement, we also invite the 6th grade families.
And I can appreciate that. And if that's your typical outreach strategies, but it's still not reaching those parents, so it's like, what are we going to do differently to get out there to do it just a little bit differently in terms of that? So that's something just to think about, and I'm happy to be a part of that or have, put you in part of some community members that really want to be able to do that, because we have to do things differently because we do it the same, we're getting the same result.
We also just more recently met with members of the Endowment for Youth. And so we will be working with them closely. You might be seeing an MOU come your way in order to be able to, again, begin that outreach to our African American students.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
So thank you, Ms. Sims-Moten, for bringing that forward. I just wanted to say, because I know I was excited in the last report, but I am very passionate about both these programs, and it's so exciting to see how these programs are converging and the strategic pathway that you are creating for our students so that they can go to college and be successful. And I was first introduced to PEAK through the Santa Barbara Education Foundation, which I want to put a call out and to Executive Director Ms. Margie Yayave, because her support and really seeking out funding for the PEAK program has been, I think, really instrumental to bringing it forward. And I was able to attend the first graduation, so I am very passionate about that, and to see those students succeed. And the idea of coming back and being a mentor, that is just huge. I mean, that really, I think, is what makes this program so successful, is seeing the mentors come back and want to give back, and that just promotes other students going forward. But I also want to acknowledge the leadership of Dr. Patricia Madrigal, because without that leadership and bringing it forward, it just wouldn't be where it is. And certainly the seed of this came from Joanne Keynes and Ed Behrens, and to acknowledge again that we need those brilliant seeds of our principals to bring forward to get things moving like that. So I want to acknowledge the work that they've done. Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Capps.
Thank you. Yeah, I thank you for this presentation, Dr. Madrigal and Mr. Schiff, and to our mentor and our student. Thank you so much. My question, it was fascinating to read that Franklin has it for all students. And I'm not surprised, given what I know of Casey Kilgore and that she was the keynote speaker.
Yeah.
But how does that change, and how do you foresee scaling up? I know it takes resources, but just because what I heard, sort of being part of that community is also really important. But if we could wave a wand, wouldn't we have all of our students be able to access the mentorship and the programs that you're offering? And how is that sort of, now that that's actually happening at Franklin, do you see that as a path forward? If you could just talk about scaling up, that's where my mind is going when I hear such wonderful things about both programs.
Actually had that conversation recently with Dr. Ramirez. And the biggest difficulty is the training.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, about 50% of our teachers have been trained in elementary foundations, which would be the first level of training. Like I said, expensive. So that's our biggest difficulty in moving it forward. We do have an AVID coordinator at each school, each elementary school, but it's definitely more ingrained at Franklin, and Casey has just basically bought in and said, this is what we're doing, and every classroom is a college. You have the Westmont room, you have like the college-going culture is ingrained early, and like the kids can barely read in first grade, but they're talking about the University of Oregon and stuff like that. So as much as possible, we would definitely like to have it everywhere and as deeply as Franklin. There's a lot of other initiatives also that take a ton of funding and time, so it's kind of a battle, but that would be my goal. Absolutely would be every school would look like that.
So just so I understand correctly, it's not adding new staff necessarily, it's training existing staff?
It's training existing staff, yeah.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Capps. Yes, Mr. Paredes Ulloa.
So I was part of AVID back when dinosaurs still roamed the earth. So it was a pretty primitive model in my days. So I was just wondering about retention, because Mr. Schiff is correct. It is a hard program to stay in if you're not willing to put in the time and the effort. In my days, it was pretty much one section of AVID per year. And I was just wondering, I know that's changed when Mr. Harkey was here. He kind of kept me up to date, but I was just wondering where we are now with one, retention, how many sections are we getting, and how are we keeping these students going along? Because I know in the past it would kind of pyramid up. Senior year was one section, and we kind of lost a bunch of students on the way.
Yeah, that's a good question. For the most part, we have 2 sections in each grade at each school. San Marcos is a little bit different because of the challenge of the block schedule. So they start with 3 sections and then gradually get to 2. That one's a little bit different, but we essentially have 60 kids, roughly 60 to 70 kids in each grade at each school.
Okay. And is there, I'm sorry, going back to what Ms. Capps was talking about scaling, I know a few years ago, I heard about schools becoming AVID schools. Was that ever broached about going to the secondaries and creating AVID schools, or was it just something in the elementaries that was an option?
Becoming AVID certified?
AVID white schools, so basically the entire school.
The certification, that's a good question too. The certification process has changed. So to be AVID certified in the past, at the secondary level, you just had to have a robust AVID elective program. But it's actually changing and being piloted this year that's not enough any longer for certification. Every teacher that's been trained in AVID, and so AVID secondary, there's like 100 different strands of education they can take for history teachers and social studies teachers and everyone. It's much more general in the elementaries. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. The certification, now everyone that has been trained has to be using those AVID strategies and curriculum regularly in their classroom to retain certification. And if they don't, you're not certified any longer. So, I mean, which is a good idea. I mean, the strategies work, the curriculum works, so why not have it in all classrooms as much as possible? Same issue though, the training is expensive.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
So, Brian, would you mind, Mr. Rouse, would you mind opening that door for us? We're just kind of dying up here, dying on the vine. It's like, all right. All right. Thank you very much. So we're going to move on to G4. G3, discussion of recommendation to adopt mathematics instructional materials for grades 6 through 8. Ms. Carey and Mr. Ramirez, Dr. Ramirez.
Good evening. Last spring, it was April, and I came before you and had a very robust report about instructional materials and the process for adopting them. And actually, that was really significant because it had been many years since we in Santa Barbara Unified had made a recommendation to the board to approve the adoption formally of instructional materials for any of our major grade levels or subject areas. So just to kind of set, this will be a lot less robust because we pierced the veil last spring with all of that, but I do want to just refresh the context for you so you understand some context for this more succinct recommendation for your action. In spring last year, you approved by May the adoption materials for world languages in all secondary grades for Spanish and French, and you approved for mathematics the Math 1, the CPM curriculum core connections for Integrated Math 1, Integrated Math 2, and Integrated Math 3. Just again to give you a kind of a refresher on what our journey has been, math last adopted any kind of instructional materials in secondary grade levels in 2007, so over 10 years ago. And even though there isn't a lot of new math knowledge in the field of math relative to other subjects, there's a lot of new knowledge about math and how best to learn it. And just to characterize for you what some of the shifts in 2010 with Common Core standards adoption, there was a significant standards revision in 2012, and it wasn't until 2013 that the California Framework for Mathematics was issued, giving us guidance about some of what the significant curricular shifts were. I'm going to give you the cliff notes on that because, again, we had that report in the spring last year, but just a reminder that some of those curricular shifts for mathematics were shifting around some of the content amongst the grade levels, hence the integrated math course sequencing is one example of that. Also a real focus on mathematical practices, not just content, but also in terms of content, maybe we could call it even more relevant content, new content, so statistical analyses, mathematical modeling, things like that at all grade levels. With our teachers of mathematics and students taking mathematics in grade levels 6, 7, and 8, we engaged in the same kinds of processes, but did not arrive at consensus by the end of last school year. And we need to re-engage in a process to formally pilot 2 vetted options that teachers had the chance to preview and evaluate in areas like content and access and technology and how mathematical practices are addressed. We have now come to a consensus. We have got engaged in a series of meetings with teachers and with site leaders from elementary schools in our district and from our junior high schools. We've just concluded that process this month, and we are bringing forward to you this recommendation that for 6th grade, we adopt illustrative math. Math 6 is from Open Up Resources, and that for, maybe you could scroll down, Brian, and that for grades 7 and 8, we are recommending Core Connections, Course 2 and Course 3, which might seem a little confusing, but recall that for Common Core state standards, the standards are lassoed into grade spans K5, 6, 8, 9, 12. So the 7th grade course is actually the second in the series, and the 8th grade course is the third in this series. In both of these cases, and Dr. Ramirez can feel free to chime in whenever, both sets of materials are focused on problem solving, in many cases real world problem solving, lots of elaborate structures for not just developing students' mathematical reasoning, but also their literacy and other kinds of problem solving. And where the content is very much what we say sometimes spiraled. So you'll see lots of really good articulation across the course sequence in mathematics. A highlight of the recommendation that we're making for sixth grade mathematics is I feel like this is a really pioneering group. They're very enthusiastic about illustrative math, and they are very much sort of demonstrating to us, both in sixth grade classrooms and in our summit pilot at La Cumbre Junior High School, how to incorporate open educational resources as our curriculum materials. And a highlight about the recommendation for adoption for grades 7 and 8 would be that this is in alignment with the CPM materials that were adopted by our high school grade levels, Math 1, 2, and 3. Any additional comments? Okay.
Good evening, board. Yes, just to, as Ms. Carey eloquently stated, this has been really what now is in really over a year's worth of a process. So it's been very inclusive. It's been very dynamic in the way that it's been undertaken. One highlight that I would like to make, there might be some wonderings about if in fact and the standards are written in terms of grade spans, why then are there different choices being made in 6th versus 7th and 8th? And that was really at the core of many conversations that we had all throughout the process. This is where engaging in discussions with teachers about local factors, local dynamics, first and foremost. We have really a PK6 structure in our elementary schools, a little different than other districts that might have a 6-8 model. We also have partner districts that flow into our junior highs, and in certain cases, the bulk of our district elementary students, while they do ultimately attend all of our junior highs, there is a greater preponderance on the east and west side with Santa Barbara Junior and La Cumbre. So all of those were dynamics that came into the room. And when we talked about decisions, it was about midway through the process that we, in consultation and really in strong advocacy from teachers who really focused on the content, the substance of the materials evaluated, that they felt very strongly that 6 should, in its own right, have its opportunity to make its own decision a bit untethered from the 7th and 8th. And there are an abundance of plausible, reasonable, logical arguments why that was something that we, as district staff, wanted to make sure we supported. So, and in addition to understanding that the daily activities, the planning, the collaboration that happens in 6th grade with multiple subjects is quite a bit different than it is for the 7th and 8th grade teachers. But all along there was a holding to agreements. There was a holding to keeping a learning progression for students at the forefront. And as late as this afternoon's meeting, that continued to be the case. So I just wanted to make sure that I addressed that point, because it may have been something that elicited questions in your mind about why we're presenting the content as such.
Thank you both, board members. Ms. Parker.
Thanks. Just a question. Our secondary math TOSAs are Dr. Schneider and Ms. Hollister, is that correct? So they've been participating in this whole process all the way along. Okay. First question, illustrative math, is that being used in any of our partner districts?
Illustrative math is not being used currently, to my knowledge, in any of our partner districts. And they too, we did some auditing of local partner districts, and they have some of the same dynamics that we do, where the grade spans are broken up in such a way that they did need to make an independent choice around 6th. It also happens that publishers or organizations that are in the publishing field, because as you notice, this is an open source curricula, they have really focused on specific grade spans more than others. So they're at this moment isn't an abundance of materials that are comprehensive, continuous, from TK or K all the way on to 12th grade. And that's for a number of dynamics, not the least of which is a changeover in the secondary to an integrated pathway.
I hope as a district that we monitor that as time goes forward, because I know it's all still too new, but it would be very interesting to see, like demographics, as they're coming into the same textbooks across all the junior highs, is there a difference when you're comparing apples to apples in how they transition into the CPM math in 7th and 8th grade. So that's just a note. I do hope that the materials will be available again in the district office for parents to come and take a look at. If CPM, so my kids went through the Coombra Junior High, and CPM was the textbook for my older two, one of whom is now a math major in college, and they're both great mathematicians, and it was really successful. But when I took a look at a CPM textbook, it is not parent-friendly, and it is, it really requires a strong math teacher to use it well in the classroom, and I think we have those math teachers, so I think that that's great. But I also feel like it was interesting. I got a comment from a parent in the fall who was at Goleta Valley and had older kids who had used a different textbook at Goleta Valley Junior High and was just like, what is this CPM textbook? It's terrible, and these are all the reasons why. And so I want to be careful that parents don't look at that and think, what's going to be going on in the classroom, because I don't understand what I see on this page. So I don't know if you can address that at all.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that point up, Ms. Parker. I would agree. When you look at the CPM materials, and everyone I do want to confirm is invited to do so. So beginning tomorrow, we'll have those in display in the superintendent's front office area. So both for illustrative math and for CPM. It does not look like the math that most of us who are parents ourselves now experienced. And so it can be very disorienting. I would also concur with you that in my journey these last 12 months of working really closely with our math faculty, both in the high school grade levels and in the junior high grade levels, that we have some exceptionally strong math teachers. So I feel like our future is in very, very capable hands. One of the things that was very helpful for me to discover is that CPM does produce a parent guide that effectively speaks right to your comment and my own impressions. It effectively says, yes, you're used to seeing in your own experience, and even as a parent, like the one that you referenced who had older children, a sample problem, a series of practice problems that look very, very similar, and answers in the back to make sure you're doing it right. And that is not CPM. This is not our mother's algebra or pre-calc or whatever. This is a different kind of thing. It's not accessible in that way. But this parent guide does that crosswalk for parents. It sort of connects the dots and translates, what they might be accustomed to looking at in a math text with how CPM approaches those same things. The parent guide is free and downloadable, but we also just discussed, as recently as this afternoon, making those available in hard copy at school sites for distribution to parents. They exist in English and in Spanish. So we've looked into that, given that careful thought. It's a really good question.
Great. I'm glad to hear that it's available in Spanish as well. And I hope that reassures parents, although, I mean, honestly, when we did the transition to Common Core, in some ways it's like Common Core math at the elementary level, right? Where it's not, it's not the example and you do the same thing and this is how you do it. It's a lot of discovery. Mm-hmm. And so we had a lot of parents that were frustrated about that at the time, and they seem to have gotten over it because we aren't hearing those comments right now anymore. I think that it's kind of made that transition, and hopefully that will happen without too much drama at the junior high level. Certainly, I know that CPM can help teach students really, really well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? All right. Thank you very much.
All right. You'll see it again in a couple weeks.
Thank you.
All right, well, now we're about to embark on a series of exciting board policies. I know we've been waiting for this, but here we go. So we're going to start with the first reading and discussion of Board Policy 1330, Use of School Facilities. Mr. Hetjunk.
Thank you. BP 1330 describes how schools let community groups and organizations use the facilities. The changes don't affect what we currently have in our administrative regulation and our fee schedule. There we still are complying with both the old and new versions of board policy. It is basically California School Boards Association changes based on recommendations in recent legislation. The paragraph highlighted in yellow is a paragraph that the district added some time back at the request of Human Resources to be included in this policy, in addition to what California School Boards recommends. Be happy to answer any questions you have on this one.
Board members? Not our wordsmither, doesn't have any, nope. Ms. Sims-Moten?
I just, in that first paragraph where it talks about by district residents, is it only those residents within our school boundaries, or does it include anyone in the community? It was just.
I think by district residents, they're talking about typically the people that use our facilities are people that are in our school boundaries that rent for Civic Center Act. Most of our rentals are in fact nonprofits for school-aged children after school activities, churches, testing, evaluation, ACT tests, things of this nature, dance groups with our theaters.
Yeah, I would just, thank you for that. I was just, when I read that, I thought, would we excluding anyone by saying that, but it didn't look like that we are.
Very seldom does an individual rent our facilities, because most of our nonprofits are not individuals, and that's the majority of our use. And based on our guidelines of what we rent for.
Okay. And then I had one other question. So I noticed that we do take in fees for the facilities. And so my question is, are those funds then allocated to that facility for which the fees were collected, or are they just in a general pool?
In most cases, the fees collected support the maintenance and upkeep of the facilities, and the fees collected are typically non-specific except for theaters. I believe for our theaters, we try and direct those fees back into district-wide theater maintenance and upkeeps and funding theater managers, but that would be a group district-wide, not school individuals.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Jute, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
It is for school individuals, for the theater managers. I don't think it works.
Okay.
Does it work?
For the theater managers, it is for the individual schools.
All right, thank you very much.
Can I bring that back on consent next time?
Yes, we can move that to, board members, are we in agreement? We can move that to consent? Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll move to G5, first reading of new board policy 3311.1, uniform public construction cost accounting procedures.
Yes, yes, thank you. A while back, in fact, in 2009, the district elected to become subject to the rules of its organization. A lot of times you'll hear it as CUPCA instead of UPCA, because the California has always been part of the acronym. So sometimes you'll see the acronym as CUPCCAA rather than just the U. This is an accounting act that, if we follow certain accounting procedures, allows us to raise our bid limits for certain categories as indicated in the narrative. And this is basically changes requested by California School Boards Association.
Any questions, comments? Ms. Sims-Moten?
Yeah, I just had a question in the emergency action section where it's saying that work may be done by day labor. Is that through an agency that we are vetting the folks who are in the day labor? How do we
that would be district? That would be district forces.
District force. Okay, thank you.
And all of those. When we do have an emergency, we go through the County Office of Education, and typically in conjunction with their business office and the superintendent, the county superintendent, grant us the authority to go out for an emergency contract without bidding.
All right, are we in agreement to move this to consent? All right, moving forward.
Thank you.
First reading of Board Policy 3513.3, tobacco-free schools. Mr. Head-Young.
Thank you. It seems like we're always getting new rules and regulations for tobacco-free schools. We keep up with all of the required signage that we need at all of our sites, and of course, as methods change, like vaping, you have to include these types of verbiage in the policy. Again, this is all school board, California School Board Association suggested changes.
Thank you. Board members? All right, yes, Ms. Simpson.
I just had a question. So we use governing board and board interchangeably. So should we make that consistent? Where we have the top governing board and then a paragraph below goes the board prohibits. So is that the?
That's just the way they do their
CSBA
suggested policy.
language?
Yes, CSBA.
Okay.
All right, we're in agreement to move it to consent. Thank you. Moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Head-Young. You can sit down now. We'll move to G7, and Ms. Jate is coming up. First reading and discussion of new board policy 3230, federal grant funds.
Good evening, board members. This board policy is a new mandated policy which reflects the major requirements of management of federal grants. As you remember, we have been through an FPM review, and I think this is in a timely board policy. This policy addresses the board's desire to maintain fiscal integrity and transparency in the use of federal grants, key components of the district's financial management system, and submission of performance of reports in accordance with the law and the requirements of the awarding agency. If you go through most of these items that are listed here, I checked off, we are probably doing 85–90% of these, and we're working to get the remaining ones tied up with the Director of Assessment and Accountability.
All right, board members, any questions, comments? All right, can we move this to consent? Thank you. Moving forward.
I have an answer to why they start with governing boards, like first name, last name, and then they switch to board the rest of the documents. That's the pattern. That's CSBA's pattern.
All right, moving to G9, first reading and discussion of board policy 3350, travel expenses. Ms. Jate.
I believe we're on fees and charges.
Oh. Okay, G8, sorry about that.
That's
First
okay.
reading and discussion of board policy 3260, fees and charges.
Yes. This mandated policy updates to reflect the new Title V regulations and addresses remedies to provide all the affected students and parents and guardians in the district is found in violation of prohibition against unauthorized student fees. Policies also clarifies that the
Prohibition.
Thank you, prohibition against student fees do not restrict districts from soliciting for voluntary donations, participating in fundraisers, activities, and providing prizes or other recognitions for participants in such fundraiser events. So basically, you can't charge for certain activities, and it's, you can't do pay to play and things like that. Any questions?
Ms. Parker?
Do we need to call out, we can, or does there need to be a cross-reference to the field trip language, or just, that's just a question mark for me, because for field trips, it makes clear on the field trip policy that per ed code, you can ask for fees for going on a field trip. It's just that nobody can you can't keep anybody from attending, or you can't have the field trip if it doesn't mean that everybody can go. So I guess that's just a question mark. Should we make a cross-reference in here somewhere so that people can refer to that board policy?
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah.
I'll go through the policy and find out what the logical place that would be.
Mm-hmm.
All right, move to consent, an agreement?
Can we move that one to action, just so
action?
we take a look at it, because it'll have a little bit slightly different wording.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. So we'll now move to G9, first reading and discussion of Board Policy 3350, travel expenses.
So this is Board Policy 3350, travel expenses. The policy adds language on types of reimbursable travel expenses and non-reimbursable personal expenses aligned with the district mileage reimbursement rate with the Internal Revenue Service, options for reimbursement of meals, submissions, and approval of expenses, claims, and employees' responsibility for costs incurred on proper claim. It's funny because we already do this, and it's all very well listed in our AR. So I guess the policy is just specifically mentioning the things that we can and cannot reimburse for. Alcohol, gratuity, things like that.
All right, we'll move that to consent. And last but not least, G10, the first reading and discussion of Board Policy 3460, financial reports and accountability.
So this basically says the county superintendent of schools can author the authority upon receipt of a district's interim report, change the district's qualified certification to negative. This will never happen. We don't have to worry about it. But that just gives them the permit, the power to do that. I always thought they had the power to do it. So.
Did you? All right, then we will move that to consent. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we will now move on to item H, return to consent agenda items. We have item 7, Ms. Sims-Moten.
Yes, I just wanted to look at the minutes for, I think it was our December 15th meeting, specifically on the, I'm trying to think, it's 13, I believe, item 13 in there, where it talks about the iPads versus the Chromebooks. And I thought that really didn't get at what the answer was, because it was saying there, it's saying because we switched from Chromebooks from iPads because it was taking so long, but I thought it more had to do with the interface between why we switched or needed to switch for the pilot program. When we talked to you, Mr. Rickman, on that. So I don't know that necessarily states that in this comment. So it's saying here because it took too long, but it really had to do more with the interface. The pilot program didn't interface with the iPads, and therefore we had to do the Chromebooks. Do you recall?
Yes.
So yeah, okay.
We'll work on getting that.
Okay, and I think the other comment was, I think time was of essence when you had to purchase the Chromebooks, and we were requesting that at least the board, be notified of that, understanding that technology is changing very fast, but if we could have prior notification, that would be great. So if we could add that as well. That was it.
Thank you. So any other questions or comments? I just want to support Ms. Sims-Moten's comments. And is there a motion?
So are we?
Just on the January one.
Yeah, so yeah, you're only going to approve one of them, then we'll take the December 15th back for revision. Okay.
I'll move to approve part of item E7, the minutes for the January 9th, 2018 meeting.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. We are moving to item I, coming events. I just would know that we have an open house at La Cuesta on Tuesday, January 30th, right? Does anyone else have any other events? All right. I do want to pass out the future agenda items that we've been referencing for quite a while. that we actually have them here for you to look at. So take one and pass it down. Just so you have the knowledge of what we have that exists currently as an item, and if there is one that you want to bring forward, is there one that you want to cross off? Maybe focus on, you really would like to push forward?
I'll
Yes,
just
Ms.
note
Parker.
that this was through December, so I felt like that, wasn't there a new request for an agenda item at our January 9th meeting? Is that correct? No?
Or did you want that one?
Or did we just talk about the fact that you needed this list? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think I said we
Okay.
need the list to
All right.
figure out what to do.
Okay.
Okay.
Ms. Parker?
I have dress code down here as a future agenda item, but I think that that was going to be handled by staff and not necessarily needed to be an agenda item. So I'm going to put a strike through if, and then maybe we can just get like a Friday letter on whenever, because you were going to be taking a look, Dr. Wagneck, on.
I have updated the exhibit. I've updated the exhibit.
You keep trying.
I have updated.
I will move to the podium.
I thought my assistant principal voice would work. I've updated the exhibit, and yes, I think just writing that up and putting it in a Friday letter would suffice. I'm waiting for feedback from assistant principals and principals before moving forward, but just very briefly, I have taken the gendered language out of the dress code.
Great, thank you. So, Dr. Reed, if you want to put a strike through on that whenever you get a chance, you can do that.
Okay, and I see a link. So you, back in 2016, special education preschool programs, and then I brought up in 926 preschool TK presentation, including kindergarten readiness data, and then Ms. Sims-Moten is talking about first five. So I see like a trifecta here of conversation that perhaps we might want to bring forward.
Could be one. Yeah, sorry, I'm thinking about the Taylor and his killing 7 with 1 blow or whatever it was. But.
So one thought was, Ms. Sims-Moten, you had suggested first 5 to be a sort of a launch into that?
Yes, actually we were on the schedule, but just due to the activities we had to obviously defer given the disaster and everything going on in the community, but we do want to be on there. We also wanted to also, if possible, present with Ms. Robertson too as well, so how we can, coordinate that is what we really want to do.
Okay.
To get a stronger partnership with the early care and education.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Paredes Ulloa.
I changed my name on purpose just to mess with Kate, but no. No, I actually would like to see kind of like either like an update on translation interpretation services here in the school district. So I'll just adopt Ms. Assemblymember Lamone's agenda item, but maybe if it doesn't necessarily have to be an agenda item, but I'd like to see something. Maybe it can just be emailed me or whatever. So.
Great. And I know we're continuing with the program, district program evaluations, so I know that's ongoing with Dr. Wagenet, so I appreciate that. So thank you all. Our next board meeting will be Tuesday, February 13th, the regular board meeting. And if there's no objection, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting.